Hey, kindergarten, it's Mrs. Seals back for our next science lab. So we've been talking about objects in the sky and day and night. This week, we are going to be talking about another object in the sky, which is the moon. So let's get started. So your target says I can observe, describe, and illustrate the moon. So let's start out by making sure we all understand what is the moon. Well, the moon orbits or moves around the earth. And I should have a better model than this for you, but orbits means it moves around in a circle. So in other words, if this is our earth and this is our moon, the moon moves in a circle around the earth. That's what orbit means. The moon is the Earth's closest neighbor in space. And what that means is that out of all the things in space, like the sun and the stars, the moon is the closest thing to the Earth. And the moon is made of rock. The moon is basically a giant rock. So if you are able to get to the moon, like some astronauts have, you can actually stand and walk on it because it is solid rock. So I want to know, why does the moon sometimes look different? Here are some different ways I have seen the moon look. Look at these pictures. Have you ever seen the moon look like any of these? I bet you have. So my question is the moon actually getting bigger and smaller? Or is something else happening to make it look like it's getting bigger and smaller? And the answer goes back to what I was telling you before. Because the moon orbits or circles around the earth. And guess what? I think I forgot to mention this. The moon does not make its own light. The light we can see on the moon is actually coming from the sun. The sun makes light and it reflects or bounces off the moon. And since the moon is orbiting or moving in a circle around the earth, we see different parts of the moon different times. We can only see the part of the moon that the sun is shining on. So this says, is the moon actually changing size and shape? The answer is no. The moon orbits the earth, and because of this, we can only see the part of the moon that the sun is shining on. The moon does not make its own light. The light we see is the sun's light reflecting or bouncing off of it. Here are some different ways the moon looks. Sometimes the sun isn't shining on the moon at all. This is called a new moon. So you can see in this picture, you can see the moon a little bit, but it's very dark. The sun's light is not shining on it. Other times, the sun is shining on a small part of the moon. This is called a crescent moon because this part of the moon that is being lit up by the sun, that makes a crescent shape. Other times I can see a little bit more, like half of it. You could call this a half moon or a quarter moon. And then sometimes I can see most of the moon, but not the whole thing. This would be a gibbous moon. And then other times, my favorite, this is called a full moon. This is when the sun is shining on the whole side of the moon that is facing the earth, and it's a big bright circle in the sky. So it's important to know that these, what we call moon phases, are a cycle or a pattern that repeats over and over again. And these phases go in order. Once the cycle is over, it starts back over. We know exactly what the moon is going to look like tonight based on what it looked like last night. So here's a little picture of that. If you start here at the new moon, this is showing you that I can see a little bit more of the moon each night until we get to the full moon. And once we get to the full moon, it doesn't just jump back to a new moon. Then we can see a little bit less of the moon each night until we get back to the new moon. And it's called a new moon because that's when this whole cycle or pattern starts back over and it repeats. in the same order again. So some things you can do to practice the moon at home. You could practice drawing what the moon looks like each night. You could keep a moon journal. You can watch the moon over the next couple of nights. You can make a prediction about what it will look like tonight or tomorrow night based on the pattern you're seeing. You can draw a picture of the moon. I am going to show you, the kids in class are going to be making these phases of the moon out of Play-Doh. So that's what I'm going to be showing you. You can also do different things with food like cheese and crackers or Oreos to make the moon phases too. If you decide to do any of these, I would love to see. You're welcome to send me a picture. Here's my email address. Again, it's not required, it's just for fun. So let me show you the moon phases with Play-Doh. This is what the kids are going to be doing in class with a partner. They have this paper right here. And this paper is a little bit backwards because it has the full moon at the top. I always like to start with the new moon since that's when this cycle starts over. So, and the kids are also going to have this yellow Play-Doh, or some kids will have white. So if we start with a new moon, remember the new moon doesn't have any light from the sun shining on it. It is just a little tiny, or sorry, I got confused. It is just a big rock in the sky. And when the sun is not shining on it, it is very hard to see. So I'm not going to put any Play-Doh on my new moon because the sun does not shine on the new moon. And then I'm going to look at the arrows. So now my next phase, there's that crescent moon. That's where I can just see a little tiny bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a circle of my Play-Doh, kind of smash it out. And then I'm going to use a cup. You could use anything round. If you have round cookie cutters, that would work too. I'm going to use a cup to make kind of that crescent shape. And it doesn't have to match up with this perfectly. I'm just going to do my best. Perfect. There's my crescent moon. I'm going to save this because I think it might work for my gibbous moon because a crescent and a gibbous are kind of the opposites. Okay. Next is my waxing quarter, or we might call it a half moon. So I couldn't see any of it. Now I can see a little bit more. Now I can see half of it. So I'm going to take a circle of my Play-Doh, and I want this to be a nice even half. So I'm going to use my knife to cut it in half, and there's my half moon. So look at my pattern here. I couldn't see any of the moon. Now I can see a little bit more. Now we're to our gibbous moon where I can see most of it, but still not quite all of it. This is where I think I'm going to use the leftover that I used my crescent for, and it's going to fit perfectly right there because it's not quite a full circle, but almost. All right, so then finally we're at our full moon. The moon is a big bright circle in the sky. And then remember, we don't just jump back to a new moon. Now our cycle kind of goes in reverse. Instead of the part I can see getting larger each night, now the part I can see is going to be getting smaller each night. So after my full moon, I can see a little bit less of the moon. There's my gibbous. Let me get a circle here. I'm going to kind of flatten. I don't have a nice neat circle, so I'm going to flatten this out and kind of make my circle first. And then make my gibbous. Ooh, it's a little bit bigger, but it still gets the idea. It's not a full moon, it's a gibbous. Then I'm back to my half moon. I can see less of it still. There's my other half of my half moon. Now I'm back to my crescent moon where I can only see a little bit of it. And then finally, all the way back to our new moon when the cycle is going to repeat and start over. So I want to make sure you remember that this is a cycle, this is a pattern, and these phases repeat in the same order over and over. It never jumps from a new moon to a full moon to a half moon to a crescent moon back to a full moon. These phases repeat in the same order over and over and over again because this is a cycle or a pattern. Since the moon is orbiting around the earth, we can only see the part of the moon that the sun is shining on that night. I hope that you had fun learning about the moon and making the Plato moon phases, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.